In this video, I want to cover some extremely basic but very important concepts that you might have not learned yet or that I failed to cover. So, what I want to first start off is just even before getting into your workspace, trying to understand what our Studio Cloud website looks like. And as you can see here, this is probably what you'll see when you open up your R Studio Cloud Workspace. You might notice that there's this little bar on the left, and that will show various workspaces that you can create. But I think for the most part, um, none of you have created these workspaces, so all of your R files and all of your R Studio projects will be listed in your workspace. So it will look maybe something like this. For today's example, though, I want to show you that I'm going to go into this workspace, which I have created, and I'm going to make a new project. Now, when you make a new project and you uh, click here and click on new RStudio project, you can leave that project whenever you want and then come back and the data should still be there, as you might have already noticed. So you can click on this here and you'll be brought to what looks like the RStudio page. Now, I noticed a lot of you actually have not figured out how to close this thing on the left side. It's a bit yeah, distracting to have that on there. So I highly recommend if you have that sidebar, click on this little button or click on this little X here. So if you click on this little X here, then it can get rid of it and you can use the whole entire workspace. This makes it a lot easier for you and both me when I help you to see the code a little bit bigger. And so you can concentrate on that. So that's the first kind of point that I wanted to go over is that when you open up RStudio Cloud, you'll have various workspaces. You can, if you want, create different workspaces. I don't recommend that. But you can start a new project by clicking here, click the new project button, and then you'll be popped up to some workspace. Now, once you're in your workspace, I just want to again review the different quadrants in R. So a lot of times when you open up a new workspace, your R workspace will look like this. This is not good. What we want to have is the workspace to look like this, not like that, like this. So you click this button. If it pushes it all the way down, you click it again, and it should make it so that there's two windows here. If there's only one window like this, that's not good. You want to either click here or you want to click here until you make sure that there's two separate quadrants. Now, the upper left quadrant is where we write our code, where we write our code. As a reminder, hashtags are comments. So that doesn't get, it actually doesn't get read as code. I mean, we can run it and it will print down here, but it doesn't run as our code runs. So what I mean by that is if you use a function and say, for example, the print function, say, hello, this is R, and you were to print that off, you'll notice that it prints off, hello, this is R. But if I were to comment that out and run it again, it wouldn't print off that hello, this is R because it's been commented out. Comments make sure that the data is not actually, the function is not actually read. It just simply prints off what it says. So again, let's go over that difference, see if you can figure it out for yourself. Run that line of code, hello, this is R, and that, and it will not, it will only run this top line. It will not print out this bottom line. Okay, so that's an important thing to note. So top left is where we write our code. We can save our code by clicking, we can click on File, Save, or we can use a shortcut on a Mac. It's Apple S, and we can say code. Just type in code, and then that code will be right there in our workspace. So that's kind of a good segue. The bottom right workspace is where all of our code and files will be placed. The bottom left, as you can see from before, is where our code prints off. So that's what the console is. And then the upper right-hand side is where our information can be saved, such as our data frames and our strings and different various other objects. So for example, when we did the my string equals to hello, this is R, and we ran it, we'll notice there that we now have that object in the top right hand side. So again, I know this is a bit much to say over and over again. Top left is where we write our code. Bottom left is where that code prints off. Top right is where our code objects are saved. So this includes our data, strings, etc. And our bottom right hand side is where our kind of file structure is shown. So this includes our code and any other things that we download, such as these files here. Now, what I also want to cover in this is like common mistakes that people often face when they're coding. I think that my piece of advice for you is to, when you're running this code, to run it in steps. So run it step by step and run it slowly in order to make sure that it works. So I'm highlighting everything here and I'm running the code. And so this is the first step to install the packages, the libraries that we're going to use. And so it'll take a second. And to be clear, each time you open a new RStudio workspace, so one of these things, you have to do this. You have to install the packages. But if you've already installed the packages once, you don't need to do it again. So I'll show you what that means in a second. So after that's done installing, I run this. And again, I think I've said this before, but it looks like there's some red, which might be a little bit scary. Maybe you're worried that it didn't work. In order to confirm that the library has worked, run it a couple of times and you'll see that it's all blue, and that means it's working. In the first assignment, I had you install a package called stringer R. So stringer R. And I installed it. But when I tried to use it as a library, I didn't include the R. So I just put string, I think, or some type of small mistake like that. And there is an error. Now, I think many of you didn't notice that there was an error. You just kind of skipped it over. But if there's an error, it means that that package did not load and thus we can't use it. So when you're doing this, you might even want to go one by one to make sure that there's no error. So it looks like, okay, no error, no error, no error. When we get to the string library, it looks like there's an error, right? So then you have to go back and figure out why. Well, in this case, it's because I was missing an R. So when I do that, then it works, right? That works. Okay, so that's the first kind of thing that I want you to know with respect to code is to go one by one, go slowly, and try to understand exactly what you're doing. Don't just run my code, try to figure it out what's happening and look to the bottom to make sure that there's no errors, okay? The second thing I want to say is when you run a line of code, there's many ways to run it, but it's probably more efficient for you to use a shortcut. So on a Mac, the shortcut is Apple Shift or Apple Enter, sorry. So Apple Enter runs the code. And as you can see here, I don't have to highlight the line of code. All I have to do is put it at the last part of the code. So if I put it there, I can run it, that works. I can highlight it and run it, that works. I can highlight, run it, and press run, or I can highlight the very end and press run. All of those will work. But yeah, highlighting each time is a bit, can be a bit time consuming. Now for something like this, when I know that I need to run all of these, I'll just highlight and then do the shortcut. But sometimes it's better to just go one by one. Okay, so now that we have done that, I want to show you another important part of using R in RStudio. So you might have noticed that I upload these R files to GitHub. Now there's kind of multiple ways you can get these R files into your file here. The one kind of, I guess, easy way is to open up a new R script, to take the code here, copy everything, and just paste it in. And so that is one way to get the code in, and then you can save it as code TA5 or whatever it is that you want to name, and then you'll see that there's another R file in there in addition to our code R. The other way to upload a file, or R code, I should say, is to just use this upload button. After you have downloaded this file onto your computer, so you can download this R file by clicking on raw and then clicking on file and then save page as. And once you see this pop up, you can say save page as, um, and you have to delete that txt because it's not a text file, it's an R file, so it needs to be .r. And once you save it onto your desktop, so as I've already saved it, you click save. Once that file is saved, you can click on choose. You can click on choose file. So that R file should now be on your desktop or on your computer somewhere. You click choose file, and then you go into that folder, wherever it is. In this case, the folder is called R upload. You probably want to click on your desktop. Maybe if you saved it on your desktop, then you can get it from your desktop. You click on it, you click open, and you click OK, and now that R code will be in there. Now, how do we look at that R code? We just click on it, and then we will see that it's now in there. Okay. So there's multiple ways you can download those R files, and I wanted to show you how to do that. Okay, so now let us go back to some code and common mistakes that are often made. So now we want to download these files like I showed you before. So specify that this is a zip file. This is an actual link on the website that contains the data for our assignment. And then I'm just putting that link there, and I'm putting the file name there. You can change this file name. You could call it my file, and then it would save it as myfile.zip. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to download this here. I'm going to run it with the shortcut. As you can see, I did not press the run button. I pressed Command Shift, and then that file now is there. Now, if I want to unzip it, I just do, again, not pressing the run button. I just have the cursor at the very edge of the screen, and I press Apple Shift or Apple Return, excuse me, or Apple Enter, and then it will run that line of code. And we can see that it did, in fact, unzip that file. So I'm checking each step of the way if it worked. I'm looking exactly what happened. Okay, so now that that's been run, we can move on to the next line of code. And remember, you have to go one by one. Like, for example, let me delete this and show you when something goes wrong. So if I were to try to unzip this file, if I were to try to run number 24 before running 22, it would not work. Why? Because the file doesn't exist. There's no mxfls file .zip, right? It says error, right? There is no file basically, so I can't do it. So we need to be sure to do it in order. So download file. Now that file's in there, then we can unzip. It's been unzipped, so now there's data. Okay, and now we can actually import some data. So I can move around this file system here by clicking here. If you want to go back to the main folder, you just click on project. I've seen some of you get pretty messed up with this too, so just be careful when you're clicking around. In order to see where you are, you can always go back to project, click on project, and you'll be back in that home folder. Now, if we want to download data or import data from this folder here, we need to both tell Stata the name of the file. So this is c_conport.dta, and we also, or ls, as this example shows, and we want to specify the folder it's in. So the folder is titled this, and this is the title here. So this read DTA just reads the special type of DTA, which is a Stata file. You can think of it as like basically an Excel worksheet, but for this program called Stata. If it's a CSV file, we do read.csv, and then we would basically, if you imagine this to be a CSV file, you would just put .csv, and it must be in quotes. And then we could read that in. But it's not a CSV file, so this is not going to work. Okay. So now we just run line 26. And you'll see now that there's a blue thing on the bottom. Well, what happened? It looks like it worked because there's no warning message or there's nothing else. If you want to clean out this workspace here, by the way, you can click this broom button. And it looks like the data is there. Now, what just happened? Like, what would happen if I just had the read DTA? And what would happen is it would print off all the data, but it would not save the data. So in order to save the data, we need to give it a name. We need to set it equals to that data that we're importing it, and then we run it. Now, this name can be anything. So I could call it data, and it would come up, and now we would have two data sets. Now, if you want to look at our data sets, again, this is something that a lot of people were having a problem with. If you want to look at those data sets, over on the right side here, there's these little boxes. And these little boxes, if you click on it will show you the data frame. So if we click on both of them, you'll see that the data is actually exactly the same. The only difference is the title, because we changed the title, and that is why we have now two different data sets. You can close these tabs, obviously, by clicking these little X's. So once that has been imported, now we can kind of do some data manipulation. Now, a problem that I often find people facing is that because they don't import these libraries correctly, they'll have trouble. They'll have trouble with this little function here. So, for example, if we want to show the head, the first 4 or 5 rows of the data set, we can type in this data, or sorry, this line of code, and it will show us the first 5 rows. If you haven't imported the dplyr dataset, however, it's not going to work. And it would say could not find this function. Okay, so try to look at the errors. If this says could not find this function with this specific thing here, then you know that the dplyr package did not install, and thus you can't get these lines of code to work. The rename function, to be clear, is a part of the dplyr library, and that's why it won't work. Okay, so that is kind of the first common mistake that I often see. The second extremely common mistake, actually we can just close this here and make this bigger. The second common mistake that I see all the time is column name not found. So let's say, for example, that we rename a lot of these columns. So this is the rename function, and I'm just renaming LS02 to age, LS16 to attendance, LS04 to gender, and so on and so forth. So I'm creating this new data set. It's called df renamed. And then what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to show you df renamed names. I'm going to show you all of the column names by using the names function. Okay, so this is a function you should get familiar with because it's very helpful. Now, the names function gives you all of the columns in that data set. And as you can see now, we have attendance, gender, and so on and so forth. This is just the renamed data from the df original data set that we imported and saved as a new data frame. So you'll notice that if you type in df names, we have those original column names, right? We don't have attendance. We don't have individual ID. They're all named something different. So a lot of times I think what happens is students fail to rename something, and then they try to say, for example, select it or group by it, and it's not going to work. So for example, let's use the df data frame and let's try to select the attendance column. So it will say here, can't subset columns that don't exist. You have to look at the errors to see what's happening. So a lot of you have been running the code, and then I think not paying close enough attention to what's happening down here. And so as a result, you're kind of missing that there is an error. So this error is pretty easy if you can read it. It just says that that column doesn't exist. So then I ask myself, why? Let's look at the column names again. Well, surely enough, when we run the df names function, we notice that there's no attendance variable. So let's put in a variable that does exist. Select ls. And this works because that column exists. So just be careful when using the column names. if you have that error, then you need to make sure that you either rename it or you maybe have to retype it here, or maybe you misspelled it. So that is one common mistake that I want you to look out for. I want to show you a few more common errors before I end the video. So the first one is oftentimes there'll be maybe some error in the code in the function itself. So for example, in the renamed, I'm taking the df renamed data set that we've been using, and I want to filter it and just get out all of the rows that all of the rows where the age is under the age of 6. So if we look at the df renamed data set and we look at the ages, we'll see 37, different ages here, 62, 35, whatever. I don't want any of those that are over the age of 6. So when I run this line of code, it worked. But let's say that if this operator here, let me just make this a little bit bigger. Let's say that this operator is just, say we're missing it, or say let's just say we're missing it. Let's clear out the space here, and let's try to run it again when there's obviously an error there. It will say filter, so it will actually tell you where the error is. So it says the error is actually in this filter function, right? So if I were to have other functions on here, like the head function, and I were to run this line of code, I would know that the problem isn't with the head function, the problem is in the filter function. So, okay, we can correct that by maybe we just want to see only the rows where the age is equal to 6. We set it equal to, and we run it and it worked. Now I want to show you what happens when some file you're trying to import doesn't exist. So let's go back to the project folder to see where our code is. And let's try to import the C underscore, let's say CV dataset. So that's right there. But let's say that we don't add the folder. So we take off the folder name and we take off that slash and we run it, and it will show us that there is unable to open because there's no file or directory. And so as you might be able to notice, let's say I was trying to save this as new data and I try to run it, you're going to see that there is no data set that's called new data. Now I had previously imported it, so that's why I did this. That's why the df dwelling is already existing, is because I already imported it successfully. But if if there was an error, then the data would not show up in the top right hand side. So we would have to look and try to figure it out, problem solve, right? This is important. So H02 is actually where the data is. And then we put a slash and then the name of that file and we import it and it looks like it worked. So it's blue, no error. Okay, so another common mistake here that I want to show you is when there's a problem with NAs. So in this data set, we have the age column that we can select and it worked. You can see that it was selected and the data was printed off at the bottom. And let's say I want to get the mean of age. So I add the summarize function. I put age mean. This can be anything you want. It could be age. And then I put mean. And then inside of it, I put the age column, which I have already selected there. And then I'll run it again by command or Apple return and run it. And you'll see that it says NA. Well, why is it NA? Well, I think I've showed this many times in the other videos, but if you take a look at that column, you select the column and you look at summary, you'll see that there's 53 NAs. So this gives us, the mean, median, and some other information, and it gives us the NAs. So its mean function will not work when there is NAs. So what do we have to do? Well, above the summarize, we put the filter. We put age not equal to NA, and then it will print out. So I actually just committed a nice mistake actually, that I can show you what went wrong. So it says there's a problem with the mean. Now, actually, this error is a bit misleading, and this is the problem with errors, is sometimes you have to really search around for where the error actually is. Now, it looks like the mean age, it worked before, right? So it doesn't actually look like there's a problem with this part of the data. the problem is I put a filter function and I forgot to put this pipe operator. So every time you have a new line, and this is a common mistake, people will sometimes forget this and it won't run. Okay, so you just got to make sure that there's a pipe operator. The shortcut for pipe operator on a Mac is Apple Shift N. And so, or you can copy and paste it, put that in, and then you'll notice that it now works. So because the data has been filtered out for NAs, the mean will be able to get the mean. And then the last thing I wanted to show you is when there's just incorrect spacing, not incorrect spacing, but incorrect like, what is it? Kind of like these symbols, right? These brackets. So when you have, for example, say, let's go to the very basics. Say we were to use the mean function and we want to use the mean function on age. Remember, you can select a column by using the $sign. And well, actually, this is not a good example because it has the NA, so the mean wouldn't work. But like, let's look at this here, and let's see that there's this basically this error here, and it tells us actually that one bracket is missing. So where is that bracket missing? Well, the summarize function itself must have two brackets. So when you look here, you type in age mean or whatever it is that you want to get. We should actually take this line of code as well because we need to filter it out, right? We need to filter out those NAs. You essentially, you have to make sure that all the functions are closed. So for example, if I tried running this again, the mean function isn't closed. And so there's going to be an error. So that is also a common mistake. And it will tell you that like there's an unexpected whatever. Basically, this means that it's missing. So then you have to kind of backtrack and try to figure out where it is. I mean, the difficult part is with the summarize function, you oftentimes, or you have to have two of these brackets. So the first bracket will be for summarize. So summarize, again, just has to be open and closed. Like, needs to have both of these sides. And if you're to put a function inside of there, it also needs to have both. So just be careful for that. Now, the last thing that I want to show you is if all goes terribly wrong with your code, the thing I suggest is to clear everything out, go all the way back up to the start, and delete all of your work. Now, this might be scary for you, but it shouldn't be, because in theory, if you've been running the code one by one, you should be able to replicate everything that you've done before. So you can just remove it, run it, and then start from the very top. And if you want, you can run it all at once, highlight everything, click run, and then you should be able to get back to where you need.